I can still smell the roasted turkey drifting through my neighbor's open window, the scent threading through the crisp November air like a taunt. It's the night before Thanksgiving, and the city streets below my apartment twinkle with fairy lights, each one a reminder of a celebration I'm no longer invited to. I stand barefoot on the balcony of my 12th floor condo, the cool metal rail pressing a faint line across the palms of my hands. My silk blouse, pale ivory, soft as a sigh, ripples in the evening breeze. From here, Boston looks almost forgiving, a sea of warm windows and distant music. But I know better. My phone vibrates on the patio table, the low hum rattling against my half-empty wine glass. I glance at the screen. Grace Johnson, my younger sister. For a moment I just stare, heart tightening. It's been 3 years since the night they shut the door on me. 3 years since I'd lost the job that paid for Dad's heart meds, for Grace's tuition, for every bill that ever arrived with our family name. And when I was the one who finally needed help, they gave me silence and a ban from the very table I'd kept full. The phone buzzes again, insistent. I breathe in the cold air, the faint sweetness of roasting squash from somewhere below. Part of me wants to let it ring. The other part, older now, steadier, knows that ignoring it won't quiet the past. I swipe to answer. 3 years earlier, the sky over Boston was the color of wet slate when everything came undone. I remember standing outside the revolving glass doors of the firm, clutching the cardboard box they'd handed me, the drizzle slicking my hair to my cheeks. My reflection in the dark windows looked like someone else, a woman who'd built a career from endless 12-hour days and missed holidays, only to be erased by a 2-minute meeting. I had spent nearly a decade carrying my family on that salary. Every Christmas bonus went to Dad's cardiologist, every late-night overtime check to Grace's tuition or Mom's overdue electric bill. When Mom's car broke down, it was my credit card that kept her on the road. They called me their rock, their safety net, and I wore those words like a badge. But that night, as the drizzle turned to icy rain, the badge felt like an anchor. I dialed home anyway, my thumb trembling. "Hi, Mom," I said when she answered. I lost my job today." A pause. Then a breath that wasn't sympathy, more like exasperation. "Oh, Harper," she sighed, using the full name she saved for disappointment. "What are we supposed to do now?" I blinked into the rain. I thought maybe we could talk tonight. I could use." Her voice sharpened. "You've been the one paying for everything. If you can't anymore, maybe you should skip Thanksgiving this year. It'll be too awkward." The words sliced cleaner than any layoff notice. My own mother, who'd leaned on every extra shift I worked, was banning me from the table I'd kept set. I barely heard the rest. Something about needing time to think, about how Grace was already under so much stress with finals. When the call ended, I stood there numb, the rain mixing with the hot sting on my cheeks. My hands shook so badly the phone nearly slipped. A week later, when the holiday came and went without an invitation, the silence was louder than any fight. That was when Aunt Margaret, my father's quiet, bookish sister, appeared at my apartment door. She carried a small cedar box, the kind that smells faintly of old forests. Inside lay a single handwritten note. "You are more than what you give. Build a life no one can take from you." Beneath the note rested a silver locket etched with tiny vines. "Your grandmother's," Aunt Margaret said softly. "She'd want you to have it now." I closed the clasp around my neck, the metal cool against my skin. And something in me, some tiny, hidden ember, flared to life. That night I opened my laptop and started searching for anything that could help me rebuild. The locket became my quiet talisman, cool against my collarbone as I navigated the long nights that followed. I wore it like a private promise. No one would ever have the power to pull the ground from beneath me again. At first, survival looked nothing like success. I took a temporary job answering phones at a small architectural studio, hardly glamorous after years in corporate finance. My desk wobbled, the chair squeaked, and every morning I arrived before dawn to brew the first pot of coffee. But there was a strange comfort in starting small. It was there that I met Evelyn Moore, the firm's senior partner. Tall, silver-haired, and always wrapped in a silk scarf the color of storm clouds, she carried herself like someone who had wrestled life and won. Evelyn noticed everything: the precision of my spreadsheets, the way I reorganized the project files after hours. One evening, when the office had emptied and I was still hunched over invoices, she paused beside my desk. "You have a mind for strategy," she said, her voice low and sure. "Why are you hiding it behind a reception counter?" No one had ever asked me that, not even my own family. Over the next year, Evelyn became both mentor and mirror. She taught me how to see opportunity in every problem, how to read contracts, pitch proposals, and negotiate fees without flinching. I stayed late, chipped nail polish gripping my pen as I sketched budgets. I arrived early, the scent of strong coffee cutting through the winter dark. When the firm landed a struggling startup as a client, a small chain of boutique cafes, Evelyn tossed me the file. "Give them a plan," she said. I poured myself into it, mapping out marketing strategies and cost-cutting ideas until my eyes burned. Weeks later, the client sales surged, and Evelyn handed me my first real title, project consultant. It was a modest promotion by corporate standards, but to me it felt like a mountain peak. For the first time, my wins belonged solely to me. Outside of work, I posted only the vaguest updates: a picture of the Charles River in autumn, a single line about new beginnings. I never mentioned promotions or pay raises. My mother's number stayed stored but untouched in my phone. Grace sent the occasional group text, holiday photos, inside jokes, but I replied with polite brevity. Meanwhile, I saved every bonus check. By the second year, I had enough to launch my own small consultancy. I worked from a tiny loft with peeling brick walls and a view of the skyline that glittered like possibility. Clients found me through word of mouth. First a local bakery, then a pair of young tech founders, then a regional retailer desperate for reinvention. Each success fed the next. I learned to speak with quiet authority, to walk into boardrooms with a steady heartbeat. 3 years after that rainy night outside the revolving doors, I had contracts across the East Coast and a waiting list of new clients. The locket still rested against my skin, a cool reminder of every sleepless night and every boundary I'd drawn. I had built a life no one could take from me, one my family knew nothing about. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and golden, the kind of late autumn day when every tree in Boston looks as though it's been dusted with copper. I'd planned to spend it quietly, just me, a novel, and a walk along the Charles, but the phone call the night before had unsettled that plan. Grace's voice still echoed in my head. "Harper, can we talk? We're at Mom's place. Things have changed." For hours I debated. Part of me wanted to stay wrapped in the calm life I'd built. Another part, still the girl with rain on her cheeks, needed to see for myself. By noon, I was standing on the front porch of the house I hadn't entered in 3 years. The old white siding, once meticulously kept, had dulled to the color of unpolished bone. Wind rattled the dried cornstalks tied to the porch rail. Grace opened the door. She looked older, the tension around her eyes softening into something like regret. "You came," she whispered. I stepped inside. The scent of sage and roasted turkey hit me first, pulling at memories I'd tried to bury. The dining room buzzed with quiet chatter until the moment everyone saw me. My mother froze at the head of the table, carving knife suspended midair. Dad, thinner now, rose slowly from his chair. For a breathless second, the only sound was the ticking of the old brass clock. "Harper," Mom said finally, her voice careful. "You look well." I glanced around the room. The wallpaper had faded, the carpet frayed. I remembered every bill I'd once paid to keep this house shining. And then I noticed the uneasy eyes. Cousins, an uncle, even Dad. They weren't just surprised, they were expectant. Grace cleared her throat. We could use your advice," she said. "The mortgage. Things have been tight since Dad's hospital stay." There it was. The same need, wrapped now in sheepish tones. I set my coat on the back of a chair and met their eyes. 3 years ago, I began, my voice steady. I lost my job. I called you for support and you told me not to come to Thanksgiving. Do you remember? Silence. Only the clock answered. Mom lowered the carving knife. "We were scared," she murmured. "You'd always taken care of us." We didn't know what to say. "I know," I said. "And while you were figuring it out, I figured out something else." I pulled a slim leather folder from my bag and laid it on the table. Inside were crisp contracts, my consultancy's latest deals, figures that spoke louder than any boast. "I built my own firm," I continued. "We manage brand strategy for companies up and down the coast. These," I tapped the contracts, "are this quarter's clients. I don't need help. I haven't for a long time." Their faces shifted in slow motion, disbelief giving way to something rawer, guilt, awe, a flicker of pride. Dad's hand trembled as he reached for his glass. Grace blinked rapidly, tears threatening. "I didn't tell you," I said softly, "because I needed to know I could stand on my own. And I can." Mom finally set the knife down, her shoulders sagging. "Harper, we were wrong. We should never have shut you out." For the first time in years, I felt no bitterness, only the quiet weight of choice. The room, once my place of servitude, now belonged to me in a different way. I clasped the silver locket at my throat, the cool metal a steady pulse beneath my fingers. "I came today," I said, "not because you need me again, but because I wanted you to see the woman I became, without your approval." The clock ticked on, and every eye in the room stayed fixed on me. For a long moment, no one moved. The turkey's aroma hung in the silence, rich and almost sweet. I could feel every pair of eyes, wide, cautious, waiting to see if I'd come to gloat or to save them. Grace was the first to speak. Her voice trembled. "Harper, we were awful. I don't know how to make it right." I drew a slow breath and let it settle. "Making it right," I said, "starts with all of us understanding that help isn't a one-way street." Mom's chin lifted a fraction. "We were scared," she said quietly. "When you lost your job, it felt like the floor disappeared. We panicked." "I know panic," I replied, keeping my tone gentle but firm. "But panic doesn't excuse shutting someone out." Dad cleared his throat, his hand resting over Mom's. "You have every reason to be angry. We're asking for a chance to fix this, if you'll give it." I looked from face to face, measuring the room. 4 years I had been their provider, the steady heartbeat behind every light bulb and paid bill. Now, the power to define our future, mine and theirs, was finally in my hands. "I'm willing," I said at last, "but there are conditions." Grace nodded, as if bracing herself. "First," I continued, "no more silence when things get hard. We talk, even when it's uncomfortable." Mom blinked rapidly, then whispered, "Agreed." "Second," I said, "everyone contributes something, time, money, effort. We don't lean on one person. Not me. Not anyone." Dad gave a small, solemn nod. "And finally," I touched the silver locket at my throat, "respect. For each other's choices. For the work each of us does, paid or not. We show gratitude instead of taking it for granted." The room exhaled, as if a storm had passed. Grace reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "I can do that," she said, voice steadying. "I want to." Mom's eyes glistened. "So do I." I studied their faces, creased with regret, softened by something like hope, and felt a surprising warmth bloom in my chest. Not the old ache for approval, but a calmer recognition. I was no longer the family's safety net. I was simply a daughter and a sister, standing on equal ground. "You asked for advice," I said quietly. "Here it is. Take small steps. Start by being honest, even when it's messy. That's how we build something real." For the first time since I'd arrived, Dad smiled, a small, almost shy curve of his mouth. "Welcome home, Harper." It wasn't a plea. It was an offering. I squeezed Grace's hand and let the moment settle, knowing the power had shifted not because I demanded it, but because I'd finally defined my worth on my own terms. Over the next few weeks, the changes came in quiet ripples rather than grand gestures. Grace began calling on Sunday evenings, not to ask for help, but simply to talk about her classes and the poetry club she'd joined. Mom sent me a recipe for her cranberry orange relish, written in her looping script, with a note that said only, "I'd like to start over." One evening, Dad left a message on my voicemail, a simple, steady, "I'm proud of you." It was barely 10 words, but it settled in my chest like a bomb I hadn't known I still needed. I kept working, my consultancy humming along, but something inside me softened. I no longer carried the constant edge of resentment. The locket, my grandmother's locket, remained around my neck, but now it felt less like armor and more like a bridge, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. A month later, as snow dusted the city streets, I invited them to my apartment for dinner. We crowded around my polished oak table, laughter gradually replacing the old silences. The skyline glittered through the tall windows, a quiet witness to the life I had built without anyone's permission. After the plates were cleared, Mom reached across and touched the locket. "Your grandmother always said strength runs in the women of this family," she said softly. I just didn't see it until now. I covered her hand with mine. "Strength isn't about never falling," I told her. "It's about standing back up, sometimes alone, sometimes together." Outside, the city lights winked against the dark, and for the first time in years the word family didn't feel like a debt I owed. It felt like a choice, one we were all finally making, one conversation at a time. As I poured the last of the wine and listened to their voices rise and fall in gentle harmony, I thought of the woman I had become, the one who had built a life no one could take from her, the one who could open her heart again without fear. I touched the silver locket, cool and familiar, and whispered the truth I had earned. Family isn't the people who need you most. Family is the people who meet you, finally, on equal ground.